Hey guys, today we're going to go through what's involved in deep cleaning a Gold Medal Whirlwind or equivalent machine. The one we're going to go through today is a little bit older, but the same principles apply to some of the newer machines. Before we get started, just a few things that we're going to need. A bowl of soapy water, paper towels, electrical clips that are insulated for cleaning our bands. Also the glass dish we're going to use as a non-conducting pan to clean our ribbons. Plastic knife or something similar that's not going to scratch the metal band on the cotton candy head. We've got some emery cloth for cleaning the slip rings on the inside. Both screwdriver tips, a 1/4-inch socket, take off the cover, and a vacuum cleaner to pick up any loose sugar. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and begin. Make sure your cotton candy machine is nice and cool. We're going to be going inside and touching the bands. Make sure you've unplugged the machine. You don't want to be touching anything live, and we don't want to be burning ourselves. So to begin, we're just going to take out the 4 screws all the way around the perimeter and set those aside. We're going to want to clean those before we put them back on, because they're going to be caked in sugar. Okay, sometimes this plate might be a little bit sticky, and what I do is I take the rubber side of the screwdriver and give it a few taps. This particular one's nice and dry, loose, so it's going to come off easily. In newer machines, this band on the inside here might be a green paper looking ring. This one's some type of phenolic plastic. We're going to just hand take off this nut in the center. This plate comes off, so all 4 of these screws come out. Once again, if this is stuck, like this one is, take the rubber side of the screwdriver, just give it a few taps all the way around until it loosens up and pops off. Kind of hard to see on camera, but this area right in here is all black, all charred up, burnt sugar. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to get rid of. Everywhere where you can see light is probably is otherwise probably okay. This ring in here needs to come off as well. So I'm just going to get a little screwdriver, try to break that sugar seal that's on there and get that out so we can clean that off. So we're going to go ahead and put all our pieces in the bath here. It's okay to get this band wet as well. What we don't want to do is run the machine when any of these components are wet after the fact. We're going to go ahead and take care of this top plate. So to do that, I'm going to start by vacuuming off all the loose sugar that's on there. Occasionally this might get some sugar buildup on these contacts, and you'd want to go ahead and take care of those at the same time. If you decide to take these off, these 2 nuts come off these rods here. This threaded rod goes through the head assembly down to the bottom and has another set of nuts on the bottom. Just be careful when you're de-threading these or threading them in that you're not threading the whole rod up and down. You want to make sure they stay at approximately the same level. We'll just go with a damp cloth and try to clean that up a little bit. So okay, we're back after rinsing out all our parts. Much easier to see now that we've washed off some of that sugar. The issue we have particularly this top ring in here, right around the connectors. The sugar's built up and baked on. So now we're going to go around now that we've got some of that sugar loosened up, and we're going to push the bands. Coming out much easier now. You do not want to scrape any of the coating off this black portion. So be careful with how you're doing it. Okay, so once we've gone all the way around that side, this band will pop out. This is a replaceable item, so if it's in too bad of shape, time to order a new one. This one, you can see from me having to break those chunks of sugar, has bent the ribbon like that, so you're just going to go back and bend it back into shape. So we're just going to go all the way around. We're just kind of finessing the ribbon back into its shape. Careful around the connector. Okay, so that band's in pretty good shape. It's fairly round. Got the majority of the stuff off of it. I'm going to just put that to the side, and then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that for this one here. As mentioned, the sugar right around this connector is really stuck, so we're just going to try to work it one little rung at a time. Okay, finally broken free, so I'm going to pull that out. The inside of this will get pretty caked up, so you just got to be careful, but I would recommend taking something like a toothbrush and getting there and giving it a light scrubbing. If you lose any of this coating, it's going to short out to the ribbons, and you definitely don't want that. An issue with this design, if it gets any water in here and you heat it up on the machine, or it'll blow a piece of this film off. So I'm just going through and just lightly scraping any of that loose film or loose sugar out of there. If you don't clear out enough of this film, it'll be hard to get your ribbon back into place later on. So to bake off the bands, I put the bands on something that's non-conducting. That's really important because these are kind of like toaster elements in that they're going to glow cherry red and light up. It's really important that you don't leave them plugged in for longer than a minute. Manual suggests a minute. I usually cut it short, 55 seconds or so. But you start to get an idea after doing it a few times. You'll be able to tell how clean the band is, if it needs to stay on there the full 60 seconds, or if maybe 30 seconds or so is enough. So I'm going to go out and move this out onto the concrete, and we'll show you what this looks like. So now we're outside. We've got our band on a piece of non-conducting surface. So now we're going to go ahead and connect up our electrical leads. We've got a red and a black. Doesn't matter which side they go on, but what we want to make sure we don't have happen is any part of them touch each other. Otherwise you're going to create a direct short. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead, going to plug it in, and once again I'm going to wait for about 60 seconds or so to make sure that it's had enough time. You're going to see a little fire. It's going to burn off some of the black burnt sugar that's on there. That's what we want to happen. We want to just self-clean with the heat. So you can hear it starting to sizzle, starting to smoke. Totally normal. That's why we're doing this outside. You don't want to do this inside and set off a smoke detector. Starting to glow red. Notice the parts that are super caked on have a little bit of fire on it. Totally normal. Okay, I'm going to unplug it now and let it cool down. And we're going to just wait a little bit, and then we're going to repeat the process again. I like to do it 2 times. The first time it's going to bake off a lot of that sugar, but it's going to leave little chunks inside the ribbon, and we want to get those out. So we're gonna let it cool down, and then I'm gonna just give it a little shake to help the burnt sugar fall out of the ribbon. Okay, and then we're gonna just heat it up one more time. Some of those little brighter spots in there still have a few pieces of baked on sugar. Okay, looks pretty uniform. I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. And now we're gonna repeat the process and do the second ribbon. On a side note, I take these ribbons, flip them inside out when I do this cleaning method. That way my electrical connections are on the outside and there's no risk of burning the cable. Once again, what I'm looking for is just like a nice even glow all the way around. No hot spots, no flame. While the other one's cooling, we can take a look at this one. So nice, cleaned off, no chunks in there. Okay, so there's actually quite a bit in this section here. Chunks, if you can see that. So I'm just going to stretch it apart a little bit, knock those out, and then I'm going to put that back together. So this is all going to be an issue when you go to spin again your next time. This is what you want to get rid of, these big pieces in there. Okay, once those are all out, and you're just going to push this band back into place and try to make it as even as you can. These ceramic portions here where the electrical connections are made stays a little bit warmer, a little bit longer, so just be aware of that. Another little piece in there. And always, trying to put this back into, or keep this into a round shape. You don't want it to get too out of a circle. So now I'm going to go ahead and flip it back inside out. And also note, I'm not bending these wires here at all. I want to keep them the same shape they were before. That way they go right back into the screw terminals. You don't want to mess around with these too much, because then you could risk cracking the ceramic connection at the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one aside. This one's ready to go back in, and I'm going to clean the next one. Okay, with both bands cleaned, we're going to go ahead and reinsert them back into bands here. We've flipped the wires back on the inside. We're just going to go ahead and feed it back in the housing. Try to keep the spacing between the ribbon as consistent as possible. What happens is if you make it too tight, in one particular spot, then the sugar will have a hard time going through the band. You're going to end up with a clogged spot again. When you go to put in the second one, make sure the ceramic's directly across from the first one. That way your electrical connections will line up properly when you go to install it back on the head of the machine. It's going to look something like this. We've got our two ceramic pieces across from each other, and our wires like this. Now these are electrically connected to each other, so we want to make sure that we don't put it on this way. That would just be shorting out the ribbon. We want to make sure it goes on this way, so we have one electrical connection on each side. So we're going to grab our 4 little screws that we washed earlier, and we're just going to reassemble like we did when we took it apart in the first. If you put it in this way, you can see that the screws would not reach, right? So when you put it in, make sure your ribbons are set up so that they're going to reach the correct spot. And these don't need to be super torqued, just nice and snug. One thing to watch out for too is that these metal contacts here don't touch this metal plate here. When installing new ribbons and adjusting these wires so they fit, I've accidentally had them bent down too far, and they'll short out and arc over to that bottom plate, and you don't want that to happen. So if you hear an arcing or a crackling noise, make sure that you've checked that there's some separation between the bottom of the metal of this connector and this metal plate down here. Okay, now that that's on, we can go ahead and put our plate over top. And then we've got our plastic nut. Once again, I just thumb tighten this on there. Doesn't need to be super tight. Washer for separation. These leather straps, they're still wet. It's okay. It's on the outside of the machine. Don't over snug them, because you don't want to tighten one side down more than the other. So I, kind of like a tire, do opposite screws just to the bottom, and then you can go back around and make sure these stay nice and straight out the side. And that is it for the top. What I do now is I'll plug this in, I'll let it run for about 5 minutes or so to let it make sure that it's all air dried, make sure there's no water left in the crevices of this band on the outside. Once I'm thoroughly convinced that it's dry in there, then I'll go ahead and turn on the heat and then let it bake out any extra moisture that might be inside that head. You do not want to get this wet and have the heat on. As I mentioned, you could blow off the film, short it out to the ribbon, and you're going to ruin the components and you'll have to replace them. So once this is chipped, there's no other option but to replace it, and it's an expensive part considering the cost of the machine. Go ahead and plug it back in and go ahead and turn it on. Now the head's nice and cool, we're going to go ahead and shut the machine off. And we're going to go ahead and remove these 1/4-inch screws. There's 4 of them, 2 on each side. Once again, these little magnetic bowls, super helpful for keeping all the screws. And this will just slide out and off to the side. We'll go ahead and we'll put those in a bowl of water. We're going to go ahead and get the vacuum and suck up any of this loose sugar in here, these little chunks that are around the outside. You want to make sure that you've unplugged your machine at this point. And it's important too to use a vacuum that's pretty much dedicated to your cotton candy machine. You don't want to be using a vacuum in your garage and then using it inside your machine as well. Try to keep it food with food and not mix different contaminants into your food grade machine. So now here's a good example of the brushes. We can just pull the spring back and take a look. Brush has plenty on it left. It looks fine, so we just want to make sure that we've got enough brush making contact with the slip rings. We can go ahead and visually inspect. Our slip rings are these copper rings. There's 2 of them here, 1 down here and 1 up top. We just want to visually inspect, make sure there's no pitting and that it's not super tarnished. We want to see primarily that bright copper color. And this one doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit dark on the bottom. Let's go ahead and take a better look at these slip rings. Okay, so as mentioned, there's a little spring here. We're just going to pull it out of the way to get our brush off. Do the same thing on the other side. And all we're doing is making sure that we're not going to have any contact with the slip rings while we do this part. So we're going to go ahead and feed this emery cloth around the outside. Once again, if you have a lathe, you could take these slip rings off and have them trued out, but that's not always feasible. Okay, so now that we have emery cloth on both sides, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the machine on. I just want it to loosely sit in there, and what I'm going to do is slide it up and down just a little bit while the machine's spinning to help brighten up those pads. And we're only going to want to do this for like 10 seconds or so. And try to be as consistent as you can. You don't want to be doing too much at the top, don't want to be doing too much at the bottom, nice and even all the way across. Okay, that's probably good enough. And we'll just let it stay loose while it slows down. Okay, so hopefully you can tell that bottom one's a lot brighter than it was previously. Now we're going to go ahead and unplug the machine again. These don't have power until you turn the heat on, but just as a matter of course, unplug the machine. We're going to slide our brushes back into place, put the retaining spring back on them, and then let's go ahead and vacuum that out to make sure we haven't left any dust or debris in there. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and slide this back in. And you don't want to over tighten them right now because you want to line these 2 sides, the gaps up on these 2 sides. So we're just going to put them in loose at first, line up our gaps, and then tighten them up when it's all. I just like to give it a manual spin to make sure that this gap in here is looking consistent all the way around. And that's it for cleaning the head of a Gold Medal Whirlwind. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below and we'll try to answer as many as we can. This level of cleaning is something that you'll you'll do after some extensive use of the machine. You're not going to be cleaning slip rings or checking brushes every time you use the machine. Similarly, the head, you might get away with using it for a month or two before you need to go through the level of cleaning that we just did. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching.